Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show. I hope you're having a great day on this Friday. And it is Friday on this show, the show that tries to celebrate, does celebrate the people that are working so hard to make coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. And today is no exception. I always enjoy the opportunity I have to circle back with my friend Jeff Duncan, especially this year as we talk about the New Orleans Saints that are not just New Orleans team, but the entire Gulf South team. And we're all excited about where the team is. We got a lot of questions still, but 2-0 is a good place to be at this stage of the game, given all the new moving pieces. Anyway, coming to my friend Jeff from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Good morning, Jeff. How you doing?
Morning, Ricky. Yeah, 2-0, and look, it's a great start to the season, and looking forward to getting up to Green Bay at historic Lambeau Field to see if they can go to 3-0.
My sister Mitzi and her husband Mac have actually leased a house up there somewhere in Wisconsin, and they're going to go to the game and enjoy some time there while they're in town. You know, as you know, man, it's like going to another country when you go to Wisconsin, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so historic. You can feel the history there. The fans are incredible. The nicest fans by far in the NFL. I mean, you go in some of these places, Chicago, Kansas City, it can get a little hostile. You go to Green Bay, everybody is so friendly and nice and welcoming. It feels like you're in a small, like a college town, or like it reminds me a little of like Friday Night Lights and Texas football, high school football. And I think it's going to be a great game. The weather's supposed to be spectacular, and should be a good matchup. But two teams that really down the road, who knows? This could have playoff implications. I know we're in week 2. That's really early, but you never know. And these two teams have a lot to, on the line in this game.
That's why I think one of these teams knows they want to score a lot of points because the points could play into the overall situation toward the end. Listen, I'll tell you that I had the opportunity yesterday to pre-tape a show that's going to play Monday, because this is when Hunter Dawkins, who's the president and owner of the Gazebo Gazette and also a contributor to SuperTalk Mississippi News, and I did a bold prediction that I knew by the time it plays on Monday, we will know how it turned out, and I owned up to this. We don't have the benefit of knowing how the Green Bay game played out. Here was my bold prediction, and then you're a guy who always is the one who's going to bring sanity to the conversation. But here's what I think. I think that the defense continues to play extremely well, short any major injuries, and I think for the most part, we played really good football and mostly injury-free football. On top of that, you've got an offense that's still feeling its way out. We've had 2 of the past 2 games where in the second half they sort of figured out the pass protection scheme. I thought Tony Jones Jr. was unbelievable the way he played pass protection, and he's lit up a little bit. Yeah, I think we're going to see more screens. I think with Sheed and Olave and Michael Thomas, and we haven't really even gotten the tight ends involved in the game yet. That you're going to start to get into the game. We got to get some rhythm. I think we finally start to get some rhythm. We break a couple of big plays. I think the Saints win this game, and maybe pretty decidingly. But we'll see how that plays out. I know that you're a little bit more. You got a pretty cool barometer when it comes to Game 3 with all these moving pieces. But how do you read where the Saints are right now?
Well, very similar to the way you read it. I mean, I think their offense is still a work in progress, which was kind of what we expected. And if you really think about it, Ricky, I mean, you got a lot of new pieces to that offense, a lot of moving parts, a new quarterback. You don't have Alvin Kamara in the backfield, so you got a new running back. You got a new left side of the offensive line. Mike Thomas is returning after 3 years. So you just have a lot of different pieces that are trying to be incorporated into the system, into a highly sophisticated, complex offensive system. So it makes sense that they would be struggling a little bit at times for continuity and consistency. And what you hoped is exactly what's happened, that the defense would be strong enough to carry the team until the offense gets on track. And I think it's going to go to another level here in a week when Alvin Kamara comes back, because we really haven't seen much of the screen game, which is where he excels. Really will help the pass protection when you can use the screen to slow down that rush. That's something we haven't seen much of. So there's a lot of reasons to be encouraged. And look, they played two good defensive teams so far, two good defensive fronts, which I think have exposed some of the weaknesses in the offensive line that might not get exposed in other games because they're not as strong up front. Now, conversely, I'd say the defense, while it has played extremely well, has played two very limited offenses, very, very limited. So, while I do think the defense is going to be a strength all year, they're not going to shut people down every game. But they do have one thing going for them. They just don't play a lot of elite quarterbacks. They just don't. I mean, the schedule works out. There's no Pat Mahomes. There's no Joe Burrows. There's no Lamar Jacksons. So this defense should be able to control most of these games they play, and at least keep the Saints in them to where, in the fourth quarter, like these last two games, they're playing to win or at least in a chance to win it.
One of the things, I just shared an observation I have. I'm confident we'll work through it. But Carr, once he got under a little bit of pressure, I saw some stats, actually. The first game that he actually threw pretty well under pressure. The second game, he did not throw well under pressure. I think he was like 30-something% under pressure. But he seemed a little rattled. He seemed a little bit. You should anticipate. You would think that that the pass protection could be a little bit subject. He felt a little rattled.
That was the knock on him with the Raiders. That was on the scouting report on Derek Carr is give him happy feet and he'll throw the ball into coverage. Doesn't like to get hit, and you're seeing a little of that. So I think that's something to monitor going forward. It's a good observation.
On the other hand, though, I watched a podcast the other day that said that watching New England play offense is grueling and not exciting and all that. And they actually compared where the Saints are to where New England is. That feels a little old school. It's lacking some innovation and whatever. Aside from that, just if you know that your quarterback could be someone who would be impacted by pressure, you would think that they would be calling plays that would reduce the pressure. So is there some responsibility here for play calling? Maybe at Monday Night Football, did they play it too conservatively? What's your thought about that?
Well, look, I mean, you can't really call plays to reduce pressure. I mean, if the other team is going to throw 6 rushers at you and do these stunts and stuff, I mean, there's only so much you can do. They've got to block and protect, and so I don't know if you can really do much of that. You can throw screen passes. That's what we talked about earlier. They can help slow down that rush. That was a big Sean Payton strategy. But, I don't think they have the backs right now that excel in that part of the game. And then the other thing I think that plays into the screen game is the athletic ability of your offensive line. And that's one of the things I think that they lack with James Hurst at left guard. They're probably going to have to run screens to the right side and take advantage of Cesar Ruiz, who can pull out. You have to have athletic linemen that can get out and clear the way. And that was something that Jari Evans excelled in. It's really not a strength of most of these offensive linemen on the Saints team, except for Ruiz. So Eric McCoy as well can get out and clear the way. So there's some limitations to that, but I don't think it's going to get a lot better. I think Trevor Penning played a little bit better in this game, but I do think this is going to be an issue all year long. The Saints are going to have to scheme it up. They're going to have to use different protection patterns. They're going to have to help out. But there's going to be times when he's under a lot of pressure. And I should say, if you look at the pressure stats around the league, I mean, the Saints are far from the worst. I mean, they're in the middle of the pack. So it's not like this is an epidemic or anything. I think we cover this team so intensely that I think sometimes everything gets magnified. Yeah, he's been under pressure, but, it's far from as bad as some of the other teams in the league.
Well, when you see, I saw a really good edited piece, and I mentioned Tony Jones Jr. When he came into the game, in pass protection scenarios, it was pretty cool to watch how he was very effective in those scenarios. This kid throws his body in there, and he was in one case he threw a defensive lineman and raised him into the air. Yep. So, they obviously has been doing some course correcting. It's the second half in both games, they were much better, which obviously enabled them to get these big plays they needed.
Yeah, you got to have time to get the ball down the field. I do think Derek Carr is really good at anticipating, getting the ball out quick. But your observation on Tony Jones is an astute one, because that's really a hat tip to Mike Parrington, the pro personnel director, for bringing him in after he was released by the Broncos, because he knew the Saints system. They knew they needed depth in the backfield. If they'd have brought in another back that hadn't been in the Saints offense, he would not have been able to come in and do what Tony Jones did. He wouldn't have had the experience in the system to be prepared to handle those pass protection calls that they're being called out ahead of time. And that's the reason why I think this week, when they're getting Kendre Miller back, I think you'll see Kendre Miller, who's a rookie, who hasn't had a lot of time in the system. I think you'll see him working primarily on first and second down. And when they get into these passing situations, you're going to see a lot of Tony Jones because of that pass protection, that skill that he has.
I definitely see it. And when you add up the numbers on the running game last game, it was absolutely incredible. It was a great game because of our buddy Taysom Hill. When we come back, we'll talk about, where does Tony Jones fit in with Jamal Williams? It seems like he might be a better blocker. I don't know. We'll see what Jeff has to say about that when we come back on the other side. It's been very interesting watching the national media sort of react to the Saints since the Monday night game, because that's what puts them up on the national stage, and then the national media start paying attention. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But we went to break. We talked about Jamal Williams. He has a hamstring injury. Roy Jones Jr. comes in, and we see his great blocking, but Jeff was pointing out to me during the break that Jamal Williams is a really excellent blocker as well. So he's all these guys, none of them are Alvin Kamara at the end of
the day. Yeah, Alvin Kamara is going to take this offense to another level, because you could dump the ball off to him and he could make people miss. He turns 4-yard gains into 14-yard gains, and that's what they're kind of missing right now in the running game. But we saw Pete Carmichael turn to the Taysom Hill package, and it was very effective. And I think I mentioned this on the program last week. Tennessee was prepared for it. They had the whole offseason to prepare, and it wasn't effective against Tennessee, a well-coached team that had extra time to work on it. We see what happens when you only have a week to work on it. There's not as much time, and it's much more effective. That's why I expected it to be more effective against Carolina. Even though the Panthers know the Saints, it's a whole new coaching staff. So they didn't have time to implement. And I think it'll be effective again this week against Green Bay.
Well, it's interesting, Jeff, as I started this segment out talking about the national media sort of taking note, but they're starting to kind of figure it out. They see Michael Thomas. His possession, his hands are incredible, and his ability to catch in tight scenarios is incredible. And that Buttocks catch where his butt just hit just in time, and beautiful. Then you see Olave doing his magic. I mean, everybody was just oohing and awing over that. And then you have Shaheed Rashid doing what he's doing, and then you have everyone tends to come back again when you start focusing on the running game. They marvel at Taysom Hill. Again, we call him the Swiss Army knife, but the fact is this guy is tough as nails, man. He's also fast as a cat. When you add it all together, if we could just get in rhythm, we could be deadly.
Yeah, I was talking to some of the offensive players yesterday about that. Like, the ceiling is very high for this offense, but the offensive line is the engine that makes the car go. And that is an area that they've got to get better in. And I'm not sure it's going to get much better. And we kind of know what these guys are. I think Trevor Penning will improve with reps. But the rest of the unit, it's not just Trevor Penning. I mean, the rest of the unit's had issues. And the offensive, the run blocking hasn't been as well. But when you come in with that Taysom Hill package, you get into the numbers game. And the Saints will always have one extra number because the quarterback isn't accounted for. And that's why it's so effective right now. You've noticed the regular running game not quite as effective, but they're keeping teams honest in running the ball. And like I said before, those are two good defensive fronts that are hard to run on as well. I think they'll be much more effective running the ball on Green Bay this week. Green Bay gave up, I think, 200 yards rushing last week to the Falcons. Now the Falcons, I've been over the top in my praise for this running back in Atlanta, Bijan Robinson. I mean, this guy, Ricky, is special. I've seen a lot of players. He's going to be one of the elite players in this league for a long time. So, take that with a grain of salt. The Saints don't have a Bijan Robinson. So we'll see how the running game plays out as we go forward.
Well, when you look at the offensive line coming into the season, your big concern was Trevor Penning, but the fact that they're all having some issues, does that surprise you?
No, not really. I mean, like Ryan Ramczyk, people don't know what he goes through to play every week. I mean, he had a very serious knee injury a couple of years ago. He's not the same player he was when he was making All-Pro every year. This knee is troublesome. I mean, very serious thing that he has to take basically, hardly practices during the week now just to be able to play in the games on Sunday. So he's still a warrior out there. He's still technically one of the best in the league, but athletically, he's not where he was in his All-Pro years. So I think people see his name and know his reputation, but that's just the reality of where he's at. And then Cesar Ruiz has not played as well as he did a year ago. He's been a little inconsistent. And then you got James Hurst, who ideally would be your sixth offensive lineman, and they plugged him in there. So this is not the line of 5 years ago that was one of the top 5 in the league. It's just not. It's probably more middle of the pack. And there are going to be days, especially when you go against a front seven like Carolina, that has Derek Brown and Frankie Louvu and guys like that, Brian Burns, they're going to get beat. And it's probably going to happen again this week in Green Bay. They have some very good front seven guys.
And one of the things we're noticing, and I think this is more the innovation of innovation, the evolving innovation is what I meant to say, of the National Football League defense, is that a lot more stunning, and they're getting the plays are more creative, on the defensive line, that is, and how they involve linebackers from time to time, how they involve free safeties from time to time. It's hard to be an offensive lineman, isn't it?
Well, what I think's happened, to be honest with you, is the way players now come into the league, when they're younger, high school, college, the really great athletes want to play on the defensive side of the ball. That's where they're making the most money. So they're incorporating, like you said, defenses are getting more athletic. They're getting faster. So they're taking advantage of that athleticism by getting players to move in space along the defensive line. And I can still remember Mike Baugh, the Saints' longtime scout, a couple of years ago when they drafted Cesar Ruiz. He said, look, there's only, God only made so many big men that can move fast and be agile. So when you can get them on the offensive line, you get them. That's why the Saints try to invest, because they know supply and demand. There's just not that many athletic offensive linemen that can block these incredible athletes along the defensive line. And I think teams are just taking advantage of that. They're trying to get guys to move in space and with these stunts and games. You're right. It's difficult, but there's just not that many really elite offensive linemen. We see it on the other side. I saw it in the Tennessee game. Tennessee just could not block the Saints' defensive linemen. Their offensive linemen, their offensive line is not good enough. So it's a common problem around the league.
Well, we wondered about our defensive line, how they might play with new players and rookies, et cetera. Boy, the early readings on them have been very good, haven't it?
Yeah, and again, I always have to temper you, Ricky, because they played Carolina without both their starting guards. And they really took advantage of that. That's part of what you saw them attacking those guards, and were very successful in it. And the same thing with Tennessee, a line that's going to probably get better as the year goes on, but had 5 new players in different spots. So they get another break this week. I mean, David Bakhtiari is not playing. He's by far the best Packers offensive lineman. And Edgerton Jenkins is also injured. He's probably a game time decision. He's the second best offensive lineman. So another chance to take advantage of that. And Carl Granderson, clearly, look, he's in a contract year. He's going to get paid by somebody this offseason. And you can see the motivation in him. He's stepped up. I mean, I think I saw Pro Football Focus has him ranked as the 7th highest graded edge rusher in the league so far. Who would have thought that? So he's taken a step this year and blossomed.
It's been fun watching them play inspired football, and they may be going against some mediocrity on some of these lines for the injury purposes that you mentioned. But the reality is, man, they have pursued hard, and they can't, every play they're going with reckless abandonment, and Breezy's kind of playing his role of creating disruption, and It's good to see a defense come. Listen, man. I mean, again, coming back to national media who watched him on Monday night, the word elite has been used a lot related to this defense. And, people are, you don't want to say this through two games, but history making. This team has really got, I'm telling you, the defensive side of this team has got some unbelievable potential. And then you look at Marshawn Lattimore, the way he's not been playing down. He's been playing up for everybody. That was the big rub on him before, that he tended to play to the level of competition he was going against. Can make some bad receivers look good, but that is not the story of Marshawn Lattimore this year. They have elite status, don't they?
Well, definitely Marshawn Lattimore is elite. There's no question about that. I think he's graded the number one corner in the league so far in the first 2 weeks. So he's risen to the occasion. I think Dennis Allen talked about that this week. He had a little sour taste in his mouth the way he played last year after that freak injury. And he's been locked in all offseason. So it's no surprise there. And once you have a guy like that, it's like a domino effect. He can take out the top receiver, and then everybody else kind of goes down the line. You've seen teams attacking Alante Taylor, who's the new nickelback in the slot, and have had some success against him. I think I saw the numbers the other day. He's been targeted 20 times and 16 receptions. So that's an area that's going to, be a work in progress. I think they made that move with Bradley Roby to go to Alante Taylor, to go with a young player that they think by the end of the year they'll be better there than they would have been. So I think that move was made with the future in mind. But again, I think the thing that separates the Saints defense, I'm writing about this weekend. It's going to be interesting. I've talked about it on the program before. There's a coordination between the pass rush and the secondary, the pass coverage, that's really, unique, I think, in the league, and how they coordinate it and how well it goes together, and it's synchronized by Dennis Allen.
It's very, Dennis Allen, man, he's a defensive genius. He's really understands the game, and he's great at putting the guys in the right spot to win. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue that part of the conversation with Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and we're talking about the Saints. We were talking about the defense before we went to the break. And Jeff, it's interesting because the more you pay attention to the Saints, the more you start to understand the roles, as it relates to Alante Taylor, for example, playing the slot. You don't expect in this. I guess I'll get your point of view about this, but I don't think you expect that you would have a shutdown slot player. They're going to catch some passes. I think the key there is he's going to defend some passes for sure, but they got to tackle quick. That's a threatened area. You got to be quick as a cat to play that. And even though they've caught some passes on him, you do expect that to happen. And generally, he's played pretty well as it relates to tackling and staying on top of his guys. Everything happens fast for the slot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and look, the Saints will take that. That's kind of what they give you, right? That's how defenses operate in this league. That's why it's been so, kind of unique and rare that the Saints have been able to get these deep balls down the field to Olave and Shaheed. It doesn't happen very often in the league now. What the defenses are doing in this league is they're playing back two safeties, and they're forcing you to throw the ball underneath or run the ball. They're almost daring you to run it, and they're saying, hey, we'll give up 3, 5, 7-yard gains. We see Mike Thomas is making a living on that. These little short passes, not yards after the catch. He's getting hit immediately. Defenses are giving you that. And what they're saying is you're either going to get a holding call, you're going to drop a ball, you're going to make a mistake at some point, and then we're going to get you in a down and distance where we can win. That's how the league operates now. So it's unique that the Saints have hit some of these deep balls because the teams just aren't playing that way anymore. It's very difficult to do. So, yes, they'll give up these short passes, these short completions in an effort to, once you get down to the red zone, we'll start playing real good red zone defense, and we'll hold you to a field goal. And that's kind of been the defensive strategy against the Saints so far, forcing them to be patient. And we've seen them have to kick a lot of field goals early on because of the way teams are playing them.
And what's interesting is, you watch the look on Dennis Allen's face, and you watch the leaders on the defense as Carolina was, moving fast toward that single touchdown they scored. and they were mad.
Yes, very bad.
They were mad, man. They did not want that to happen.
No, and look, I mean, the defense has bailed out, Derek Carr a couple of times. I mean, Carr's interception was really not – it was a bad interception. I mean, it was a bad throw. I don't know what he was thinking. At least he took accountability for it. But really the defense bailed him out because they took the ball away with that strip sack by Granderson on Bryce Young that prevented a field goal there. And, in a tight game like that, points were valuable. So the defense has kind of bailed out the offense a little bit as they go along here. And look, they're going to have to score a few more points this week. I think Green Bay will challenge them a little bit more than they've had challenged in the first 2 weeks. And I think they know that. But I kind of feel like at this point the Saints are playing with house money. I mean, obviously they want to win this game and love to come back 3-0. But I think if anybody asks the Saints fans or even the staff privately, hey, 3 games without Alvin Kamara, 2 of them on the road, if you could go 2-1 and come back home to play Tampa Bay in week 4, you'd probably take it. So right now I think the Saints go up there with a no-lose mentality, throw the kitchen sink at the Packers. Hopefully you get a win, but if you don't, you're still in very good shape.
Listen, I've read some of the Carolina press since that game, and, man, they have been tough on their new coach. They have been tough on their rookie quarterback. You think that's warranted?
Well, I mean, a little bit. I do think their game plan was very conservative against the Saints. Didn't really challenge the Saints where they're weak. I wondered why they weren't challenging them in some ways. But Bryce Young's going to have some growing pains. I mean, it's ridiculous to expect him to step in the league. Look at Drew Brees' rookie year with the Chargers. He didn't light the world on fire. If you just look historically, Trevor Lawrence, every rookie quarterback.
Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning was one of the worst. There's going to be growing pains. But I will say this. I told some of my colleagues yesterday at practice, Bryce Young looked small out there to me. And what I mean by that is when the Saints, you could see their strategy was to rush 4 and to not get overly aggressive in their pursuit. They kind of did that sugar rush where they're kind of half attacking, half not, keep him in the pocket. It was a very smart strategy because he's only 5'11" or so. And he really looked short. If you notice, he had to bail out numerous times and try and get outside the pocket. You can't live your life that way in the NFL. It doesn't work. So they're going to have some struggles. They don't have the receiving core, the weapons. Once they lost Moore they traded him to the Bears in the offseason, DJ Moore. Once they lost him, I mean, they lost any perimeter threats. So really, they were going to struggle to move the ball against anybody, much less the Saints defense.
And that's been one of the criticisms is he doesn't have good targets. But what's interesting? I watched him closely when he was at Alabama. We follow Auburn very closely. Me being from Alabama, you're going to pay attention to what Alabama's up to. In some respects, as a quarterback, you think the coolness is a good thing. That he's one of the most cool, monotone players I've ever seen, especially at quarterback position. And my son Jordan noted maybe that played well in college, but to what extent is that going to be something that actually plays against him in the pros because he's not able to express his leadership sort of the way that Carr did, really fired up, bringing the team together. He's almost too cool. I mean, you think that could be a factor in his success?
No, look, I think he'll learn, and he's feeling his way out right now. I mean, it's hard for a young guy around 30-year-old men. You're coming in, you have to lead grown men with a lot of money on the line. He'll figure it out. I'm not worried about him intangibly in any way. I do think he needs to learn, a little bit of a clock in his head. He held the ball too long against the Saints. That led to that turnover I talked about where he got hit from behind. I mean, you don't have that time at the NFL. You got about 2.5 seconds, and you either got to get rid of it or you got to scramble. He's learning that. That's why it's a good time to play Bryce Young right now. He's going to learn those things. He's a smart guy. But I would say this, and one of the things I'm writing about this week is, Matt LaFleur, Packers coach, talked about this, and I don't think people are quite aware of it. Maybe they are. But like the Saints, one of their things, Ricky, is, they hold a lot in the secondary. And it's one of the reasons why they're successful defensively. They lead the league almost every year in defensive holding calls and defensive pass interference calls. And it's not because the league's out to get them. It's because that's a strategy defensively. And that's what you saw when the officials let them play. like they did on Monday night, you'll see the quarterback holding the ball a long time because nobody's getting open because the Saints play very sticky, handsy, aggressive defense in the secondary, more than any other team in the league. And that's why they get a lot of these calls. But when they play an officiating crew lets them play, they're very effective. And Matt LaFleur talked about that this week. He told his receivers, get ready. They're going to be holding you. They're going to grab you. And I think it's very similar. I've used this analogy before to say, like Rick Pitino, basketball coach, he coaches his defense to hand check the whole time because the theory is the officials aren't going to call it the whole game. They want the game to flow. They don't want to just keep stopping the game. I think that's the way the Saints play defense. They know they're going to get away with it. And the cost of doing business is every once in a while you get a flag. Well,
so far through 2 games, they've let them play, and and if I recall really well in the past couple of years as you brought our attention to this, that it's so frustrating because so many good plays in the last couple of years, especially last year, we defended the pass. And we got an interference call of some sort, and roughing the passer or holding or whatever it might be. I wonder if the NFL's kind of let up a little bit because they were calling those like crazy last year.
Yeah, I think it's still too early to tell. I mean, but like there was I think a play in the Titans game where I think Brazil got a sack, a big play, and it got overruled because Paulson Adebo got called for defensive holding.
Yeah,
it may have been the Panthers game. I can't remember.
Yeah, that was game. Panthers. It was Panthers because he caused a fumble and he was coming home. He still got to celebrate, but unfortunately, it was taken away from him.
Right. So there's that side of it, and then there's another play in the game. I was watching the replay where Carolina had a really nice pick play called, and Paulson Adebo, you watch it on replay. He gets a hold of the guy's jersey and holds him. They don't get the call. They don't call it. And it saved probably a touchdown by him grabbing. They had an opening down the sidelines, and Bryce Young had to eat the ball. I think he might have even got sacked. So that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes they're going to call it. Sometimes they aren't. Sometimes they're going to see it. Sometimes they won't. And that's the way Dennis Allen and the staff coaches. I mean, they realize we're going to live with a few penalties. But I've done the research. I mean, they lead the league almost every year in these penalties. And so there's a trend there, right? It's part of the way they're being coached.
So we go to Green Bay, and whether we win or lose, let's hope we win. Possibility of coming back home 3-0, facing the resurgence of, if you call it a resurgence of Baker Mayfield. We'll talk about that on the other side when we come back. We'll see you after this break with my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. And let me just say one more time that if you haven't signed up for the Saints newsletter, I really encourage you to do it for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. There's so much content out there, man. Everybody's a Saints specialist now, especially on social media. So much content. But if you really want to get to the core team that really gets the Saints and covers them like a blanket, it's the team from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and the daily newsletter that they have is really, really, really good. So coming back to Baker Mayfield, we go win that game in Green Bay. We come back. We face Baker Mayfield in the Dome, potentially at 3-0. What's your read on that game?
Look, I think we're going to find out before that, Ricky, because Tampa Bay plays, I think, the Eagles on Monday night this week. So I think Baker Mayfield and the Bucs are going to have the wake-up call. Now, look, they're playing down in Tampa Monday night, so they'll be fired up. And I think that Tampa defense has actually been pretty consistent, but I think it'll be a wake-up call for Tampa Bay's offense going against that Philly defense. They've had some bad luck in their offensive line. They've already had a guy go out for the year. I don't see how they hold up against that Philly front seven, and I think the same thing will happen to him when he comes into the Superdome against the Saints defense. So I expect Tampa's going to start fading. I think the real threat to the Saints is the Atlanta Falcons. They've improved their defense. They've got a lot of weapons on offense that are very scary. Their offensive line's been improved. Their quarterback, I think the jury's out on him, but he's doing what they need to do to win games right now. So I think it's going to come down to the Saints and Falcons in the South.
Hey, what's interesting about what you just said about the Falcons, the way you just described the Falcons, they could use those exact words to describe us.
Yeah, I think Carr's much more accomplished, though. I mean, Derek Carr Mickey Loomis said it a couple weeks ago. He's not just a game manager. He can make a play. One of the things I'm writing about probably for next week, so I'm tipping my hand on all my stuff, giving it away, free content, right? But like the Saints have not dropped a pass in in 2 games. No other team in the league has not dropped a pass. And there's a reason for that. Not only the receivers have very good hands, we saw that evidenced by the incredible catch by Olave and the incredible catches by Mike Thomas, you mentioned. But also, Derek Carr throws a very catchable ball. I mean, he throws a ball. Taysom Hill talked about this in the offseason. He knows when to throw the fastball, when to put a little touch on it. And if you notice, there's not a lot of juggling catches because he puts the right amount of torque on the ball. And I think that's a very unique thing, a very unique skill that Drew Brees had, and we just haven't seen it here. But to have no drop passes in 2 games is pretty incredible.
That's actually a really, really good point. And you talked about that during the offseason, that he's coming in with this. He's got a really, really good arm. He can throw the deep ball. He can do the intermediate stuff. He can put the zip on the short passes if he needs to. You talked about that. If you go back and look at that, let's just take those 2 passes that you just mentioned. The Michael Thomas catch that was incredible, but you see how good his hands are, and Olave, his concentration. Truthfully, honestly, if that ball to Olave had been anywhere else, that defensive guy would have got it because he was on him like white on rice, buddy. He was incredible.
Same thing. The first pass of the game against the Titans to Mike Thomas was a 25-yard gain. That ball was absolutely perfect. The defensive player was right on Mike Thomas. It dropped right over his outside shoulder. There's nothing the defensive back could do, and really there was nothing Mike Thomas could do but catch it. I mean, it was so perfectly placed. Yesterday I asked Derek Carr about this, and he said in a given game he may only throw the ball as hard as he can once or twice. Very rarely is he just letting it go. He's using different speeds for different reasons. So I think that's interesting. And he's learned that over the years. He didn't come into the league with that. It's through experience.
Yeah, let's go back and look at last year for a second. Not singling out either one of our quarterbacks that played. Well, you could say 3 quarterbacks that played, but you had a situation where we had open receivers where the ball was thrown real hard and they had to be on their game to be able to catch it, and they didn't catch it, too many times. You had open receivers where we just missed the open receiver. That was one of the reasons that made it so frustrating. So one thing that we've got going for us, even though he may get a little jittery in a pressure scenario, is Derek Carr has a really good arm, doesn't he? At the end of the day.
Yes. Well, I mean, he's used that in a couple times. If you notice some of those spot routes that Mike Thomas is using against the zone, where he just goes out and turns around, he's in between 2 defenders. That ball's got to be fired in there because Mike Thomas is going to get laid out and he's getting hit. And the ball's got to get in there in time for him to make the catch. If you saw the difference when he had to throw that ball in the back of the end zone to Chris Olave, and Olave was just getting his hands on the ball when he got it dislodged by the defenders. So the whole key is getting it there quickly so the receiver can get the ball tucked in and still complete the catch. So there's a lot of intricacies and little nuances to these completions that look, it's just a 5-yard game, but there's a lot goes into it.
Well, if we can win this week. We're going to get our number 1 running back, and Alvin Kamara's welcome home is a home game. And it's going to be so exciting. The Superdome's going to be on fire with our buddy Kyle Curley playing the music and you there in the press box kind of doing your thing. And that'd be an exciting game. Anyway, thanks for catching up with my friend and spending a whole show with me today.
Yeah, enjoyed it. And let's talk next week and maybe talking about a 3-0 unbeaten team. I'm going to have to do some research. I don't know when the last time they started 3-0. I know it's been a while. It
has been. Listen, this has been Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com of the Times-Picayune. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.